You aren't hearing enough about the trial of Major Nidal Hassan in the media. But he says he attacked soldiers on U.S. military bases because, quote, he was a warrior of Islam.
It was the worst mass murder on an American base in history. Now the trial's going to the jury after Hassan refused to put up a fight in his own defense in court. Mark Martin brings us the story.
When it came time to defend himself, Major Nidal Hassan refused to put up a fight.
Well, he just came in and said the defense rests. He didn't provide any case at all. He didn't call any witnesses. He didn't offer up any evidence.
Hassan is charged with the murder of 13 people and the attempted murder of 32 more at Fort Hood on November 5th, 2009. 14 actually died that day because one of the women he admits to shooting was pregnant. An eyewitness testified she heard Private Francesca Velez pleading with Hassan. The witness says she heard Velez say, my baby, my baby." Then there was a shot and her voice stopped. During the trial, Hassan admitted the evidence would clearly show he was the shooter. He described himself as a soldier who had switched sides, and he told the military jury he was a mujahideen, an Islamic fighter engaged in a religious fight. Hassan allowed his civil attorney to hand a report to the New York Times, which showed he told military mental health workers he could still be a martyr if convicted and executed by the government. But Hassan denies claims he's trying to get a death sentence. Meanwhile, many victims and their families are suing the government because they say political correctness kept the military from stopping Hassan. Observers say for whatever reason, the military missed the warning signs.
I do compare this to the Boston bombing, that there are facts there that could have prevented it, that the FBI had, that did not share with the Boston police. And I think that a lot of the people that saw his radical behavior were not reporting it to the proper authorities, or those that did receive the information did not want to handle it for whatever reason. And it is disappointing.
Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, the thing of it was clear. It was absolutely clear that this guy had gone off the reservation. He was a disciple of Anwar al-Awlaki, the radical from Yemen, and there was no doubt at what had happened to him. But political correctness, we have got to get over this political correct stuff. Islam is our enemy. It isn't a peaceful, innocent religion. It is the enemy. And it teaches war. It teaches violent behavior. It teaches, as he said, I'm a warrior on a jihad. We are the victims of this kind of thing, and it's got to be brought out. And yet we're trying to muzzle the military to keep them from speaking out about it. Well, as we continue the 700 Club, thanks for being with us. Innocent men, women, and children may have been the victims, excuse me, of a deadly chemical attack in Syria. Here's Lee Webb with that story.
That's right, Pat. UN investigators are on the ground in Syria. They want to look into new allegations that the Syrian government is using chemical weapons on rebels and innocent civilians. It is a so-called red line that President Obama had warned would force the U.S. to intervene in Syria. Chris Mitchell has that story.
The international community is calling for clarity in the case of fresh allegations that the Syrian regime is using chemical weapons against rebels and civilians.
This represents, no matter what the conclusions are, a serious escalation with grave humanitarian consequences and human consequences.
Syrian regime forces fired intense artillery and rocket barrages Wednesday into the eastern suburbs of Damascus in what some claim was a poisonous gas attack that killed hundreds of people, including many children.
Human Rights Watch has spoken today to 10 residents from eastern Ghouta, including 2 physicians. The residents consistently told us about field hospitals in the area being overwhelmed with civilians that were suffering from a range of symptoms, including nausea, suffocation, foaming at the mouth, and dilated pupils.
Amateur video showing shocking images appeared to show the effects of a gas attack on civilians. The Syrian regime called claims of a chemical attack absolutely baseless. In March this year, President Obama suggested that the use of chemical weapons might force the U.S. to intervene in the Syrian civil war.
To use potential weapons of mass destruction on civilian populations crosses another line and that is going to be a game changer.
A reporter later pressed the White House about the comment.
Jay, did the president mean it when he said use of chemical weapons would be a game changer in Syria?
Yes, he did.
So what does that mean?
The president made clear the use of or the transfer to terrorist groups of chemical weapons by the Assad regime would be crossing a red line.
Middle East expert Walid Ferez said any U.S. or Western intervention would be complicated.
Reality is that Syria is not anymore a national battlefield, as was the case in Libya's civil war, because the regime there is supported by the Iranian regime, by the Iraqi government in some sort of fashion, and also by Hezbollah, which is fighting inside Syria. There's a whole alliance. And of course, the opposition is backed by Turkey, by Qatar, by other Arab countries. The most concerning thing about the opposition is infiltration by Al-Qaeda.
Ferez told CBN News any U.S. action would have to consider the regional elements. For now, he said, the international community could try to set up security zones for refugees fleeing the fighting. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pat, in your opinion, what should be done in Syria?
Lee, there was a time a few months ago when we could have taken positive action to support a group that was opposing the regime of Assad, and it would have had some effect. But as Fares pointed out in that interview, the rebels have been infiltrated by the radical groups of Al-Qaeda and others. So if we come in and help them now, we essentially are arming Al-Qaeda, and that we don't want to do. The administration, Lee, has just left this country in a shambles. Our foreign policy is in a shambles. He comes out and talks about a red line. This will cross a red line. Well, that means we're going to act. But he didn't act. And he hasn't acted, and he refuses to act. And here we've got a situation, for example, in Egypt, where it's clear you've got a group of pro-Western people fighting against an Islamic radical fundamentalist dictatorship. And we should be on the side of the military, but instead of that, we're withdrawing aid from the whole country. It makes no sense. We have a deeply flawed, confused president. And Lee, you said, what would I do? It's in a sense, I would have acted a lot sooner to do something intelligent. Now it may be too late. Lee?
Well, you heard Chris Mitchell in his report talk about the Syrian refugees. We will have a look at what CBN is doing to help those refugees from the civil war in Syria in just a few minutes here on the 700 Club. The National Security Agency was scooping up thousands of internet communications from Americans with no connection to terrorism. The surveillance court ordered the NSA to stop the practice, but it may have collected as many as 56,000 emails and other communications by ordinary Americans for 3 years. The Obama administration claims the NSA did not intend to gather those communications. It was just an unintended consequence, it maintains, of attempts to track terrorist suspects. A San Antonio high school student who refused to wear an ID badge with a computer chip is going back to school. The school no longer uses those chips. Last fall, Andrea Hernandez refused to wear the badge. It uses radio frequency identification technology to track students. Hernandez says it violated her religious liberty, reminding her of the biblical mark of the beast. The school district said the badges helped count students and increased state funding. But the Northside Independent School District decided to scrap the RFID program and allow Hernandez to return to her magnet school. An out-of-control wildfire is threatening Yosemite National Park. It's just one of 50 large wildfires raging right now in the western U.S. The federal government has spent more than $1 billion battling fires over the last 5 years. Right now, nearly 18,000 crews are fighting the wildfires burning uncontained in western states. The one near Yosemite is forcing the evacuation of camps and nearby homes.
It's terrifying how unpredictable it is and how fast it's moving. I don't even know what to think anymore, really.
For the first time in 5 years, the National Interagency Fire Center has raised America's wildfire preparedness level to the highest level. Pat?
Well, you know, Lee, once again, government gets involved and makes mistakes. And the thing that they should have allowed is normal fires to take place in smaller areas, which is the natural course. and it burns up the undergrowth and really diminishes the chance of these major fires. But by doing the way they've done it over the years, they have exacerbated the problem, and we have enormous wildfires now. You know, Terry, I was on a firefighting crew in the Forest Service in Montana, and I learned a little something about forest fires, and boy, to get trapped in one of them is one deadly mess.
Well, we saw that recently, but why do you think if there's an alternative to this, it's not just a disaster, it's costly?
Well, if they just let nature take its course, well, things will happen. I mean, you'll have smaller fires along the way, but as it is, they have a containment policy that mitigates against a natural clearing out of this stuff. But what we were dealing with when I was working in the Forest Service is that the logging crews were coming from private industry, and were cutting down trees, and then they had what they call slash, and they just cut the branches and stuff off those big trunks and just left them. And so now you've got this tinder box underneath the fire. And one of the things we were supposed to do is to go out and pick up this stuff and pile it up and hopefully burn it. But these are the causes, one of the causes. And of course, in those days, the Japanese were sending balloons over, incendiary balloons that were dropping in our forests and starting fires. So they'd come across the prevailing winds, you know, over the Pacific. It was interesting.
Well, you'd like to see that this wouldn't happen again year after year after year.
Well, until they get a different policy of forest management, it's going to continue to happen. All right. Lee?
Well, Pat, in other news, there is a major natural disaster in the Philippines. Torrential rains have brought massive flooding to Manilla. Government offices, banks, schools, and shops throughout the city of 12 million people are closed. Tens of thousands have found shelter in more than 200 evacuation centers. CBN disaster relief teams are there, and so is our Asia correspondent, Lucille Toulousan.
Metro Manila and surrounding provinces were paralyzed because of heavy flooding. Torrential rains induced by Typhoon Trami submerged 60% of the capital region, even turning main highways into rivers, forcing both government and private offices to close, including the U.S. Embassy. More than 600,000 people were affected by the disaster. 1/3 of these people fled to evacuation centers, but there were those who chose to remain in their flooded homes. Despite the danger of being trapped in the flood waters, the residents here, which number about 1,000 families, opted to stay in their homes. They say they are not comfortable in the very cramped evacuation centers. But for Lorena and her 1-year-old son, this space at the corner of a school gym is refuge for them.
It was my birthday yesterday, and I am just so sad with our situation. But we had to flee our house because the water was already up to my neck. It's my wish that this flooding will never happen again, not only for me, but for all of us who are now suffering.
This school that's been turned into an evacuation center houses 200 families. Among them are CBN's beneficiaries of the Bless a Child program. 5-year-old Angel is one of them. She was malnourished, weighing only 9 kilos before joining the feeding program. After 3 months, she now weighs 14 kilos. Her grandmother, Natividad, is thankful because Angel has become stronger to endure their present condition. Natividad is also happy that the CBN disaster relief team brought food, mats, and blankets for them and their neighbors.
First of all, I thank God and I thank people like you who come to comfort us and help us. It really means a lot because of all the hardships that we face.
She's also grateful to her pastor, Teresa Pastera, who has partnered with CBN to meet not only the spiritual needs of their community, but their physical needs as well. CBN has deployed several disaster relief teams to the affected areas to distribute food, mats, and blankets to the flood victims. Medical assistance and livelihood trainings will also be conducted in the days ahead to ease their suffering and help them recover from the disaster. Lucille Toulousan, CBN News, Laguna, Philippines.
Well, it's a real picture of Christ, isn't it, Pat, that Jesus left his own comfortable surroundings in his home in heaven and came and dwelt in the midst of the mess that was earth, and it really is a picture of the mercy that he so readily offers.
That's what we can do at CBN. And Lee and folks, as I understand it, you know, in the progress of mankind, human beings got closer to seaports. They got closer to water because transportation was on water, so they could ship goods back and forth. And these became prosperous. And of course, along the rivers and so forth, you'll find population centers. But if 80% of the people live close to water, you go to some place like Manila, you see Manila Bay. I mean, there's a great big ocean out there, and it's so easy for a city like Manila to get flooded. And look at Bangladesh, the things that are happening. And in other places, when that terrible tsunami hit in Southeast Asia, in Jakarta and various other places, they're subject to flooding. We're going to see a lot of that as the climate goes through some changes, whatever's going on. If indeed the polar ice caps begin to melt, if the ice in Greenland begins to melt, then of course the seawaters will rise, and it won't have to rise very much to have hideous, awful flooding, which will cause great suffering. So get ready for it, and we at CBN want to do everything we can to be ready to help people in those situations. But it's coming. You know, you figure hurricanes, they're on water, and the big population centers are going to get hit. If there's any kind of a tsunami that's coming across the Atlantic or something like that, it's going to hit population. New York's a water city. Philadelphia's a water city. Boston's a water city. And Norfolk, Virginia's a water city. And Miami's a water city. You just think of all the cities that are close to water. Okay.
You know, one of the advantages we have is that we have wonderful offices in Indonesia, in Manila, in Thailand. So when those disasters happen, we have feet on the ground immediately.
Immediately. We did that, you know, in Banda Aceh. We were the first ones on the scene when that tsunami hit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to help, and we do want you to help, we can give food, and we give mats, and we get blankets to help these dispossessed people. It's CBN International, number 1-800-759-0700. Or you can say Disaster Relief Fund, CBN, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we want to help people, but just keep in mind, we need to be ready to help them in these great population centers that are close to water.
Hindu extremists have attacked a Christian family in Rajasthan, India. 4 men went into a pastor's house looking for him and his wife. When they couldn't find Pastor Bell, they attacked and seriously injured his mother. They told her they had to convert to Hinduism or they'd all be killed and cut to pieces. As the 2014 general election cycle approaches, Hindu extremists have increased their attacks against the Christian minority in the region. They hope inciting society against Christians can help them win votes. Well, Christians facing persecution in the Republic of Sudan are being evacuated and flown out of the country. The Barnabas Fund, a ministry to the persecuted church, has already helped more than 5,000 Christians escape from Sudan. Fox News reports the ministry aims to fly out another 3,400 in the coming days. The Republic of Sudan is 98% Muslim and ruled by Sharia law. President Omar al-Bashir has vowed to create a 100% Islamic constitution. The evacuated Christians are being taken to South Sudan, a new nation founded by Christians and black Africans seeking freedom from the Arab Islamic regime in Khartoum. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.